The blizzard came without warning, as if the sky itself had declared war on the living. Isoleth pressed her shoulder against the cottage door, fighting the howling wind that threatened to tear it from its hinges. Snow lashed her face like frozen needles. Beyond the threshold, visibility had collapsed to nothing but white fury and shadow. She should have barricaded herself inside hours ago. That was what any sensible person would have done. But Isoleth had never been sensible when it came to suffering creatures. The first wolf had appeared at the edge of the tree line just before sunset, limping badly, its silver fur matted with ice. She had watched from her window as it collapsed in the snow, too weak to continue. She had not hesitated. Now, 3 hours later, 15 wolves lay scattered across her small cottage. On the floor beside her hearth, beneath her wooden table, curled against the wall where her meager supply of firewood dwindled with alarming speed, 15 wolves, some wounded, all half frozen, every one of them watching her with eyes that gleamed with an intelligence that made her skin prickle. "I must be mad," Isoleth muttered, stepping carefully over a massive gray wolf to reach her pot of melted snow. Completely and utterly mad. The wolf she passed made a low sound in its throat, almost like agreement. She had found them one by one, following the tracks and the soft whimpers that cut through the storm's roar. Had dragged them, coaxed them, and in one case physically carried them into her home. Her muscles screamed from the effort. Her clothes were soaked through and freezing against her skin. But they were alive. All of them. Isoleth ladled warm water into shallow bowls, moving between the wolves with practiced efficiency. She had always possessed an affinity for wounded things, birds with broken wings, rabbits caught in snares, the village children who came to her with scraped knees and fevered brows. Her mother had called it a gift. Her father had called it foolishness. Perhaps both had been right. "Drink," she urged softly, setting a bowl before a white wolf whose breathing rattled with concerning wetness. "You need your strength." The wolf's amber eyes fixed on her face. Something flickered in their depths. Something that looked almost like wonder. Isoleth shook off the strange thought and moved to the next wolf. In the far corner of the cottage, pressed into the deepest shadows, the largest wolf of all lay motionless. His fur was black as a moonless night. His frame twice the size of any of the others. He had been the last one she found, standing over two smaller wolves, as if guarding them from the storm's wrath. He had not moved since she brought him inside, but his eyes had never left her. Isoleth felt the weight of that gaze like a physical touch as she worked. When she knelt to examine a wounded paw, when she tore strips from her only spare dress to bind a gash that still seeped crimson, when she fed the last of her winter stores to creatures who would provide nothing in return. "You are the leader, are you not?" she asked quietly, approaching the black wolf with a bowl of water. "The others defer to you." The wolf's eyes burned like molten gold in the firelight. Isoleth knelt before him, closer than wisdom would advise. This near, she could see the scars that marked his muzzle, the silver threads woven through his dark fur. The raw power coiled in every line of his massive body. He could kill her in a heartbeat. One snap of those jaws, and her throat would be torn out before she could scream. Instead, he simply watched her. "Drink," she whispered, pushing the bowl toward him. "Even kings must accept kindness sometimes." Something shifted in the wolf's expression. His great head tilted, studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Then, slowly, deliberately, he lowered his muzzle and drank. Isoleth released a breath she had not realized she was holding. The storm raged on outside, shaking the cottage walls, piling snow against the windows until the glass groaned with the weight. Inside, warmth slowly seeped back into frozen bodies. Wolves that had lain still as death began to stir, to breathe easier, to raise their heads and watch the strange human woman who had saved them. Isoleth worked until exhaustion dragged at her bones, until her hands trembled too badly to hold the water ladle, until she finally sank down against the wall near the hearth, her eyes burning with fatigue. She would rest for just a moment, just long enough to gather her strength. Her gaze drifted to the black wolf one final time. He was still watching her. "Sleep well," she murmured, her words slurring with exhaustion. "All of you." Her eyes fluttered closed. She did not see the black wolf rise on silent paws. She did not see him cross the cottage with fluid grace, stepping over the sleeping forms of his wolves. She did not see him stop before her, his massive head lowering until his nose nearly touched her face. And she did not feel the shudder that ran through his powerful frame as he inhaled her scent, and the ancient magic of the mate bond roared to life in his chest. But the other wolves saw. They watched their alpha king stand frozen before a sleeping human woman, his eyes blazing with recognition and something far more dangerous. She was his fated mate. And she had no idea what she had just invited into her home. Corvin could not move. The Alpha King of Arendor, commander of 12,000 wolves, conqueror of the northern reaches, stood paralyzed before a woman who slept on a dirt floor surrounded by his wounded soldiers. His mate. The word echoed through his mind like a war drum. His wolf, the primal beast that shared his soul, had gone utterly still. Every fiber of its being focused on the woman before them with an intensity that bordered on worship. She was not beautiful in the way of court ladies, with their painted faces and practiced smiles. Her features were sharper than fashion preferred. Her hair, a deep auburn that caught the firelight like autumn leaves, hung in tangled waves around her pale face. Calluses marked her hands. A patch on her worn dress had been mended multiple times. She was nobody. A commoner, a healer in a village so small it did not appear on any map. And she was the other half of his soul. How long had he searched? How many years had he endured the council's pressure to choose a political mate, all while knowing in his bones that his true queen was somewhere out there, waiting to be found? Now, here she was, sleeping peacefully while his world reconstructed itself around her existence. Corvin forced himself to step back. His wolf howled in protest, demanding he wake her, claim her, and mark her as his before she could slip away. But he had not survived 30 winters by surrendering to impulse. She did not know what he was. To her, he was simply a wolf she had rescued from the storm. And tomorrow, he would have to leave her. The thought sent a spike of anguish through his chest. The choosing. The ceremony he had resisted for years could be delayed no longer. The council had issued their ultimatum before he departed for the border patrol that had led him into this blizzard. Choose a mate from the noble bloodlines, or face a challenge for the throne itself. He had planned to refuse, to fight every challenger until his body gave out, or they finally accepted that he would never bond with a woman who was not his true mate. But now, everything had changed. Corvin looked down at the sleeping woman, memorizing every detail of her face. Isoleth. He had heard one of his wolves whimper her name through their pack bond when she carried him inside. Such a fitting name. It meant solitary light in the old tongue. His solitary light, shining in the darkness of a blizzard, saving wolves she had every reason to fear. My king. The voice came through the bond, not aloud. Therian, his first beta, had shifted back to human form and crouched beside the hearth, keeping his voice to a whisper. The storm will break by dawn. We must return to the capital. I know. The choosing cannot be postponed again. The council. I know. Therian fell silent, but his eyes moved between Corvin and the sleeping woman with dawning understanding. You have found her, the beta breathed, after all these years. Corvin did not answer. He did not need to. Then refuse them, Therian urged. Declare her before the council. They cannot force you to choose another if your true mate stands beside you. She does not know what I am. what she is to me. Corvin's jaw tightened. I will not drag her into the nest of vipers that is my court without preparation, without protection. So what will you do? Corvin was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with resolve. I will return. I will delay the choosing one final time. I will make arrangements for her safety, her elevation, her protection from those who would see her destroyed before I can claim her properly. His eyes never left Isileth's sleeping face. Then I will come back for her. The council will not grant another delay. Then I will make them. His wolf demanded one thing before they left, one act that could not wait. Corvin shifted to human form for the first time since entering the cottage. Naked and scarred and trembling with restraint, he knelt beside his sleeping mate and pressed his lips to her shoulder. Then his teeth followed. The bite was gentle, barely enough to break the skin, but the magic that flowed through it was ancient and absolute, the claiming mark of an alpha king, binding their souls across any distance. Isileth stirred but did not wake. A soft sound escaped her lips, almost like a sigh of contentment. Corvin pulled back, his heart pounding. The mark would be faint at first. It would grow stronger with time, calling to him, calling to her, until neither could deny what they were to each other. Forgive me, he whispered. I will return for you. I swear it. Dawn crept over the mountains like a thief, stealing the storm's fury and leaving behind a world transformed by snow. Isileth woke to find her cottage empty. She sat up slowly, her body aching from sleeping on the hard floor, her eyes scanning the small space with growing confusion. The wolves were gone, all 15 of them, vanished as if they had never existed. No tracks led to the door. No blood stained the floor where she had tended their wounds. Even the water bowl sat dry and clean beside the hearth. Only one sign remained. On her pillow, where her head had not rested, lay a single black feather wrapped in a leather cord. Wolf clan markings were burned into the leather with precise, elegant strokes, the symbol of the royal house of Arendor. Isileth's hands trembled as she lifted it. What had been in her home last night? Who had been in her home? Before she could begin to understand, a pounding at her door shattered the silence. Isileth! Her neighbor's voice, high with panic. Come quickly! Riders from the capital! She stumbled outside into the blinding snow to find the village square filled with wolves in human form. Royal guards in black and silver armor. At their center sat a man on a war horse, his face hard with authority. By order of the Alpha King, he announced, his voice carrying across the frozen village, all unmated females of breeding age are summoned to the capital to participate in the choosing. Attendance is not optional. Isileth's blood turned to ice. The choosing. The ceremony where the Alpha King would select his queen from among the realm's eligible women. She had heard stories but never dreamed it could touch her life. There must be a mistake, she heard herself say. I am nobody. A village healer. The guard's eyes swept over her with cold assessment. No exceptions. You will come with us. Now. 3 weeks later, Isileth stood in the great hall of Valdros, the royal seat of Arendor, and watched her world end. The hall blazed with light from 1,000 candles. Noble families filled every corner, their finest garments glittering with wealth and status. And on the raised dais at the far end stood a man she had never seen in human form. But she knew him. She knew him in her bones, in the way her heart seized, and her breath stopped, and every fiber of her being strained toward him like a flower reaching for the sun. The black wolf. The one who had watched her with burning golden eyes, the one she had knelt before and called a king. He was the king. Corvan, Alpha King of Arendor, stood in ceremonial black and silver, his dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from stone. He was devastating, terrifying, the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. And his eyes, scanning the crowd, found her instantly. The recognition that flared between them was a physical force. Isoleth gasped as heat bloomed in her chest, spreading through her veins like wildfire. She saw his hands clench at his sides, saw his jaw tighten with barely contained emotion. He knew her. He had known all along. Hope surged through her heart, wild and desperate. He had come to her cottage. He had left his symbol on her pillow. He had watched her with those eyes that saw straight into her soul. Surely that meant, "The candidates will now approach," a voice announced. 5 women in white gowns ascended the dais, all highborn, all exquisite, all trained from birth for this moment. And at their center, with hair like winter frost and a smile sharp as broken glass, walked Vailith of House Morvain. Isoleth watched Corvin's face for any sign of the connection she had felt, any flicker of acknowledgement, any indication that he would refuse this farce and declare what they both knew to be true. His expression was blank, his eyes were empty. His gaze, which had burned into hers just moments before, now passed over her as if she did not exist. "I choose," his voice rang out, hollow and wrong, "Vailith of House Morvain." The hall erupted in celebration, and Isoleth felt something inside her crack and crumble into dust. She did not remember fleeing the hall, did not remember tearing through servants' corridors or finding the horse she stole from the stables, or riding blindly into the winter night. She only knew that she had to escape, because the man who had watched her heart with such intensity had just crushed it without a second glance. And the secret growing in her womb, the spark of life that had kindled without her knowledge during those strange weeks of fevered dreams since the night of the blizzard, that secret could never be revealed. She vanished into the darkness, and she did not see the king collapse the moment the doors closed behind him, nor hear the roar of anguish that shook the ancient stones when he finally woke and found her gone. 4 months later, the village of Mist Hollow gained a midwife. She arrived in early spring when the mountain passes finally cleared enough for travel. A young widow, she claimed, seeking peace after losing her husband to a fever. The village elders, desperate for a healer since old Breda had passed in the winter, welcomed her without question. They called her Wren. She never corrected them. Now summer had taken hold of the valley, and Wren had become a fixture of village life. She delivered babies. She treated coughs and fevers. She sat with the dying and comforted the grieving. And every night she lay awake with her hands pressed to the swell of her belly, feeling the life that grew stronger with each passing day. The child moved constantly now. Sometimes she could feel distinct limbs pushing against her palms from different directions, as if 2 small bodies competed for space within her womb. Twins. The village midwife who examined her had confirmed it with raised eyebrows and knowing looks. Isoleth never spoke of the father. The villagers assumed he was the dead husband she had invented. They offered sympathy and support and never pressed for details. They did not know that the father was a king. They did not know that he had crushed her heart before the entire realm. They did not know that she woke some nights gasping from dreams so vivid they felt like memories. Dreams where golden eyes burned into hers and a voice she should not recognize called her name with desperate longing. The mark on her shoulder had appeared the morning after the wolves vanished from her cottage. She had noticed it while dressing, a pattern of interlocking lines that resembled teeth marks pressed into her skin. At first faint, it had grown darker and more defined with each passing week until it pulsed with a heat she could not explain. It burned. Every single day it burned with a low, constant heat that flared without warning. Sometimes when the wind shifted from the east. Sometimes when she dreamed. Sometimes for no reason at all. She had searched her grandmother's journals for answers. The old woman had possessed knowledge of wolf kind that she had passed to her granddaughter in whispered lessons. Most of it Isoleth had dismissed as fantasy. Now she was not so certain. A claiming mark, her grandmother had written, is given when a wolf recognizes its true mate. It binds their souls across any distance. It cannot be undone except by death, and it will never fade as long as the bond remains true. But Corvin had chosen another. She had watched him do it. The bond, if it had ever existed, should have dissolved the moment he declared Valeth his queen. So why did the mark still burn? Mistress Wren? The voice belonged to young Tamsin, the baker's daughter, hovering in the doorway of Isoleth's cottage with wide eyes. What is it, child? Merchants have come through the pass. They bring news from the lowlands. Tamsin's voice dropped to a whisper. About the king. Isoleth's heart clenched. 4 months, and still his name sent pain lancing through her chest. What news? She managed. They say he has gone mad. The world tilted beneath her feet. Mad? She repeated. Tamsin nodded vigorously, her eyes bright with the thrill of gossip. The merchants say he has torn the kingdom apart searching for someone, a woman. No one knows who she is or what she did, only that the king will destroy anything that stands between him and finding her. Isoleth's hand moved instinctively to her belly. One of the babies kicked sharply, as if responding to the mention of its father. They say the crops are failing, Tamsin continued breathlessly. The wolves have gone feral in the eastern territories. The king's own guard has been sent to every corner of the realm, questioning everyone, searching every village. Searching for what? Isoleth whispered, though she already knew the answer. For her, whoever she is. Tamsin leaned closer. The merchants say he has offered a reward of 15,000 gold pieces for any information. 15,000. Can you imagine? She must be a witch to have enchanted him so. 15,000 gold. More than the entire village of Mist Hollow would see in 100 years. Isoleth forced her expression to remain calm. The affairs of kings are not our concern. Thank your father for sharing the news. But after Tamsin had gone, Isoleth sank into her chair with trembling legs. He was searching for her. Why? Why would Corvin tear his kingdom apart for a woman he had publicly rejected? Why would he offer a fortune for information about someone he had discarded without a second glance? Unless something had been wrong that night. Unless the emptiness in his eyes had been something other than indifference. Unless the bond she had felt in that great hall had been real. The mark on her shoulder flared with sudden, searing heat. Isoleth gasped, her hand flying to the spot. This was not the dull burn she had grown accustomed to. This was intense. Urgent. As if someone had pressed a hot brand to her flesh. And beneath the pain, she felt something else. A presence, vast and desperate, pushing against the edges of her consciousness, searching for her. Movement at the tree line caught her eye. Isoleth's breath stopped. A wolf stood between the ancient pines, large, amber-eyed, silver-gray fur catching the evening light. As she watched, another emerged beside it, then another, then 5 more. 8 massive wolves, their intelligent eyes fixed on her cottage with an intensity that was anything but animal. And behind them, half hidden in the shadows of the forest, a shape larger than the rest. Black as midnight, eyes burning with golden fire. They had found her. The mark on Isoleth's shoulder burned like molten iron as she stumbled backward from the window. They had found her. 4 months of hiding. 4 months of building a new identity. 4 months of convincing herself that the life growing inside her would never know its father. All of it. Meaningless. Her eyes darted around the small cottage, calculating escape routes. The back door led to the mountain path, but wolves would run her down before she reached the first ridge. The root cellar was hidden beneath a trapdoor, but their noses would find her within moments. She was trapped. A knock at her door. Firm, but not violent. Mistress Wren. A male voice, unfamiliar. Please open the door. We mean you no harm. Isoleth laughed bitterly at that. Wolves who had hunted her across the realm for 4 months meant her no harm. How reassuring. But she had no choice. Running was impossible. Hiding was futile. And if she did not open the door willingly, they would simply tear it from its hinges. She grabbed the iron poker from beside the hearth and moved forward. When she opened the door, two men stood on her threshold. One was clearly a warrior, his massive frame and alert stance marking him as royal guard. But it was the second man who drew Isoleth's attention. Silver streaked his dark hair, and decades of service had weathered his face. His amber eyes held something that looked almost like relief. She knew him. He had been in her cottage that night. The wolf who had shifted to human form and whispered with the black wolf by the fire. "My lady," he said, and the title made her flinch. "I am Therian, first beta to the Alpha King. We have been searching for you for a very long time." "My name is Ren," Isoleth said, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "I am a simple midwife. You have made a mistake." Therian's expression shifted to something like sympathy. "You are Isoleth, healer of the northern villages, who sheltered 15 wolves during the blizzard of the Black Moon. You bear the king's claiming mark on your left shoulder, and his children in your womb." The poker trembled in her grip. "How do you know about the mark?" "I never." "Because you received it the night you saved us." Therian's voice was gentle. "The king gave it to you while you slept. His wolf could not resist. The bond demanded completion." Isoleth's mind reeled. "That is impossible. A claiming mark requires consent. It cannot be given without the recipient being aware?" Therian shook his head. "That is the law for ordinary wolves. But the Alpha King's bloodline carries the old magic. When he encounters his true mate, the bond creates itself. It needs no ceremony, no permission. It simply is." True mate. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. "If I am his true mate," Isoleth said slowly, "then why did he choose another?" Pain flickered across Therian's face. "Because he did not choose. Not truly. I watched him do it. I stood in that hall and watched him declare Veileth." "You watched a puppet speak words that were not his own." Therian stepped closer, his voice dropping. "The night before the choosing, someone slipped a compound into the king's wine. A mixture of wolfsbane and shadow lotus, designed to sever the connection between a wolf and his human mind. He remembers nothing of that ceremony, nothing of choosing Veileth. The first thing he did when the poison cleared was run to find you." The world tilted beneath Isoleth's feet. "And when you were gone," Therian continued, "when he realized what had been done to him, what he had lost." The beta's voice cracked. "I have served 3 Alpha Kings. I have never seen anything like what these months have done to Corvan. His wolf is tearing him apart from the inside. Without you, without the bond being completed, he will go feral. It is only a matter of time." Isoleth wanted to believe him. Every fiber of her being wanted to accept that the man she had felt such connection to had not willingly betrayed her. But she had been fooled before. "If he wants me found so desperately," she said carefully, "why are you here without him?" Therian's expression darkened. "Because I intercepted this 3 days ago." He withdrew a folded letter from his coat. The seal was broken, but she could see the serpent crest pressed into dark wax. "House Morvain, Veileth's family." The message inside was brief. "The false mate has been located. The problem will be eliminated before the next full moon. Long live Queen Veileth." Isoleth's blood turned to ice. "Assassins," she breathed. "We intercepted 2 of their scouts yesterday. They were less than a day behind us." Therian reached for her arm. "My lady, we must leave. Now. The king is close. But if the Morvains reach you first—" A sound like thunder split the evening air. No, not thunder. Hoofbeats. Therian spun toward the tree line as shadows erupted from the forest. Not wolves this time. Riders in black leather, their faces hidden behind masks carved from bone. And at their center, mounted on a horse the color of dried blood, sat a woman whose silver hair gleamed in the fading light. Vailith of House Morvain had come to finish the job herself. "Get inside!" Therion roared, shoving Isoleth backward as his body exploded into wolf form. Chaos erupted. The royal guard shifted mid-stride, launching himself at the nearest rider. Therion's massive gray wolf crashed into two more, his jaws finding throats with savage precision. The wolves who had waited at the tree line joined the battle, a whirlwind of fur and fang against mounted assassins. But they were outnumbered. Isoleth watched in horror as an arrow found Therion's shoulder, spinning him sideways. 3 assassins dismounted and advanced on him with silver blades drawn. He would not survive. None of them would survive. Unless she did something. The power stirred in her chest before she consciously reached for it. The same warmth that had always guided her healing, but stronger now. Wilder. Fed by 4 months of suppressed fear and the primal need to protect the lives growing inside her. Golden light bloomed between her palms. Isoleth stepped out of her cottage and into the battle. "Stop." Her voice carried harmonics that shook the air itself. Every combatant froze. The assassins turned to stare at the pregnant woman who glowed like a fallen star. Even Vailith's horse reared in sudden terror. Isoleth walked forward, her bare feet leaving prints of light in the blood-stained grass. "You will not have them," she said, and the power in her voice made the ground tremble. "You will not have any of them." She knelt beside Therion and pressed her glowing hands to his wounds. The beta gasped as healing energy poured into his body, knitting flesh and stopping bleeding with impossible speed. One of the assassins lunged toward her. The golden light flared like a sunrise. The man was thrown backward with a scream, his body smoking where the light had touched it. He scrambled to his feet and fled into the forest. 3 more followed, their nerve broken by something they could not understand. But Vailith did not flee. The would-be queen dismounted with lethal grace, drawing a blade that shimmered with an unnatural sheen. "Impressive," Vailith purred, advancing slowly. "The council will be fascinated to learn that the king's pet is a witch. Perhaps that explains his obsession. You have ensorcelled him. The only poison in this bond came from your family's hands." Isoleth's power flickered. The healing she had poured into Therion had cost her dearly, and her reserves were dangerously low. Vailith smiled, sensing weakness. "When you are dead, and your bastards with you, Corvin will have no choice but to accept his true queen. House Morvain will rule Arendor for 1,000 years." She raised the poisoned blade, and the forest exploded. Trees splintered like kindling as something massive crashed through the undergrowth. The remaining assassins scattered in pure terror. Even Vailith stumbled backward, her composure cracking. A wolf the size of a warhorse burst from the tree line, black as midnight, eyes blazing with golden fire, power radiating from every line of his enormous body. Corvin. He crossed the clearing in a single bound, his jaws closing around Vailith's sword arm with a sickening crunch. She screamed as he shook her once, twice, then flung her broken body into the darkness. The remaining assassins fled, and then those burning golden eyes turned to Isoleth. He approached slowly, each step deliberate. Blood dripped from his muzzle. His massive body blocked out the rising moon, but when he finally stood before her, he lowered his great head and pressed his nose gently to her swollen belly. The babies kicked. Both of them, simultaneously, reaching toward their father's presence. The Alpha King made a sound that was almost a sob. Isoleth's hand moved of its own accord, her fingers sinking into the thick fur of his neck. "Corvin," she whispered. The shift happened in the space between heartbeats. One moment a wolf stood before her. The next, a man knelt in the blood-soaked grass, his hands hovering over her stomach as if she might break at his touch. He looked up, and she saw that the Alpha King was weeping. You are alive, he breathed. You are alive, and you are... His voice broke, and for the first time in 4 months, the mark on Isoleth's shoulder stopped burning. Isoleth had imagined this moment 1,000 times during her exile. She had imagined rage, cold confrontation, perhaps even violence. She had never imagined the Alpha King of Arendor on his knees before her, tears streaming down his face, his entire body trembling as his hands hovered over the swell of her belly. "May I?" he asked hoarsely. The question broke something in her chest. The most powerful wolf in 3 kingdoms, asking permission to touch his own children. She took his hand and pressed it to her stomach. The babies responded immediately, movements from 2 distinct places. Corvin's eyes widened, his palm flattening against her dress to feel more. "Twins," he whispered. "Isoleth, why did you not tell me?" The question dissolved the fragile moment. Isoleth stepped backward, pulling away from his touch. The warmth dissolved into cold fury. "Tell you?" Her voice came out sharp as broken glass. "When would I have done that, Corvin? Before or after you chose Valeth in front of the entire realm?" He flinched as if she had struck him. "I did not choose her. I would never." "I watched you." The words tore from her throat. "I was there. I stood in that hall and watched you look through me like I was nothing. Like the nights I spent saving your wolves meant nothing. Like the mark that appeared on my body meant nothing." "Isoleth, please." Corvin rose to his feet, his hands reaching for her. "I was poisoned. Therian told you. The more veins." "How convenient." Isoleth laughed bitterly. "A perfect excuse that explains everything. You were the victim. You had no choice. Meanwhile, I fled into the wilderness carrying your children, believing the bond I felt was a delusion. It was not a delusion." Corvin's voice hardened with desperation. "The bond is real. It has always been real. Why do you think I marked you that night in your cottage? My wolf recognized you the moment you knelt before us with that water bowl and called me a king. You marked me while I slept, without my knowledge, without my consent. Because I could not stop myself." He stepped closer, his golden eyes blazing. "Because the mate bond does not ask permission. Because every fiber of my being knew that you were mine, and I was leaving in the morning for a ceremony that would force me to betray you." "Then why did you leave at all?" Isoleth demanded. "If you knew what I was to you, why did you not wake me? Why did you not explain?" "Because I wanted to do this properly." Corvin's roar echoed across the clearing. "Because you deserved better than a confused explanation from a stranger you had just pulled from a blizzard. Because I planned to destroy the choosing, to burn down every political alliance my enemies had built, and then return to court you as you deserved." The anguish in his voice was raw, real. Isoleth felt her certainty waver. 4 months, she whispered. 4 months I have lived with this mark burning on my shoulder. 4 months I have felt you searching, pressing against the bond, and I thought I was going mad." "You felt that?" Corvin's breath caught. "Every night, every single night, I dreamed of golden eyes and a voice calling my name. I woke reaching for someone who was not there. That was me." He closed the distance between them, his hands cupping her face with desperate gentleness. "My wolf, reaching for you through the bond while my body lay drugged and helpless. The connection between us, fighting to survive even when my conscious mind was stolen." Isoleth's vision blurred with tears. "I wanted to hate you. I tried so hard to hate you." "I know." Corvin pressed his forehead to hers. "I have spent every moment since that cursed ceremony hating myself enough for both of us. Wondering if you were alive, if you were safe, if my children would ever know their father." "Your children?" She laughed wetly. "You did not even know they existed." "I knew." His hand moved to her belly again, reverent and wondering. Some part of me knew. The bond carries more than emotion. Isoleth. It carries truth. And the truth has been screaming at me for 4 months that my mate was out there, carrying pieces of my soul. A howl rose from the forest, long and urgent. Therian limped toward them, his wounds still healing, his face grim with warning. My king, Valeth escaped. Her wounds are severe, but she reached a horse. She will return to the capital before us. Corvin's expression hardened. Then we must move quickly. There is more. Therian's voice dropped. The scout we captured before the attack, he spoke under interrogation. House Morvain has been planning this for years. They have allies in the royal guard. On the council. If Valeth reaches Valdros before we do, she will claim the throne. Corvin finished grimly. She will declare me unfit, feral, dangerous. And anyone loyal to you will be eliminated. Isoleth thought of the servants who had shown her small kindnesses during her brief time in the capital. The guards who had looked at her with sympathy rather than contempt. The kitchen maid who had slipped her extra bread. How many would die? She asked quietly. Therian's silence was answer enough. We ride tonight, Corvin declared. Every wolf who can travel, we must reach the capital before— My king! A scout burst from the tree line, blood streaming from a wound on his temple. Riders from Valdros, they carry the royal banner. Corvin tensed. How many? 100 at least. They are an hour behind us. Not Morvain forces then. Someone from the capital flying royal colors could mean allies, or enemies wearing false flags. A second scout followed the first. My king, we have captured their advance rider. He carries a message. Bring him. The man they dragged forward wore the uniform of the Royal Messenger Corps, his face pale with exhaustion and fear. When he saw Corvin, he fell to his knees. My king, thank the gods we found you. The capital has fallen. The world stopped. Explain, Corvin commanded, his voice deadly quiet. House Morvain moved at midnight. 3 days passed. They had allies among the guard. The council has been imprisoned. Lord Morvain has declared himself regent, claiming you have gone feral and must be put down for the safety of the realm. The messenger's voice shook. Lady Valeth has been named queen. She ordered the execution of all who remained loyal to you. How many? Isoleth heard herself ask. 43 prisoners await death at dawn tomorrow. Servants, guards, anyone who spoke your name with loyalty. The messenger looked at Corvin with desperate hope. The resistance smuggled me out. They beg you to return, to save them before the sun rises. 43 innocent people, dead by morning unless they acted. Isoleth's hand found Corvin's arm. We have to go, she said. You cannot travel in your condition. His voice was rough with fear. The babies. We'll never be safe as long as the Morvains hold power. Isoleth met his eyes with fierce determination. And I will not hide while innocents die in your name. In our name. For a long moment, Corvin simply stared at her. Then, slowly, a smile broke across his face. Something fierce. Something proud. My queen, he murmured. Even now you think of others before yourself. He turned to address the wolves assembling behind them. The Morvains believe they have won. They believe their treachery has secured them a throne they could never earn through honor. They are wrong. A howl rose from the assembled wolves, fierce with loyalty and rage. Tonight, we ride for Valdros. Tonight, we take back what is ours. And tomorrow, House Morvain learns what happens when you threaten the true Queen of Arendor and the heirs she carries. He lifted Isoleth onto his horse and mounted behind her, his arm wrapping protectively around her waist. Together, she whispered. Corvin pressed his lips to her hair. Always, my heart. From this moment until my last breath. Together. The army surged toward the capital, racing against the dawn. They reached Valdros as the first gray light crept over the eastern mountains. The capital spread before them like a wounded beast. Smoke rose from several quarters of the city. The distant sound of screaming echoed off ancient stone. And on the great banner above the castle gates, the royal wolf had been replaced by the serpent of House Morvain. "They move fast," Therion growled. 3 days, and they have already begun remaking the kingdom in their image. Corvin's arm tightened around Isoleth. Through the bond, she felt his rage, a cold, controlled fury that was somehow more terrifying than hot anger. "How many wolves do we have?" he asked. 300 who made the journey. Another 200 loyal guards inside the city, if they still live. And the Morvains? 600, perhaps more. They have been stockpiling forces for months. Isoleth did the mathematics. Even with surprise on their side, they were badly outnumbered. "The prisoners," she said. "Where are they being held?" Therion consulted with one of the scouts. "The Great Hall. Lord Morvain intends to execute them publicly, to demonstrate the price of loyalty to the old regime." The Great Hall. The same room where Isoleth had watched Corvin choose another woman, where her heart had cracked and crumbled. Now it would be where she saved the people that choice had endangered. "I have an idea," she said quietly. Corvin looked down at her. "Whatever you are thinking, the answer is no. You do not even know what I am planning." "I know you." His voice was rough. "I know that look in your eyes. You mean to do something reckless and self-sacrificing, and I will not allow it." "Then 43 people die at dawn." Isoleth met his gaze steadily. "Including servants who showed me kindness when I was a nobody in your castle. Including guards who looked at me with respect instead of contempt. Their blood will be on both our hands." "Isoleth, the Morvains want me dead. That is what this has always been about. Remove the true mate, and you become queen by default. Remove the heirs, and your own children inherit the throne." She touched his face gently. "They have been hunting me for 4 months. They never expected me to walk through the front door." Understanding dawned in Corvin's eyes, and with it, horror. "You want to surrender yourself." "I want to trade myself for the prisoners." Isoleth's voice did not waver. "One woman for 43 lives. Even Lord Morvain cannot refuse that arithmetic. And while he is focused on his prize, your wolves can position themselves throughout the castle. He will kill you the moment he will gloat first." Isoleth smiled grimly. "Men like Morvain always gloat. He will want to parade his victory, to humiliate me before ending my life. That gives you time. And if you are wrong? If he simply puts a blade through your heart?" Isoleth took his hand and pressed it to her belly, where their children tumbled restlessly. "Then you will avenge us. And you will build a kingdom worthy of their memory." Corvin made a sound like a wounded animal. "I cannot lose you, not now, not when I have only just found you again." "You will not lose me." She rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. "I am yours, Corvin. Marked and claimed and bound. Whatever happens in that hall, nothing can sever what we share." The kiss that followed was desperate, fierce. A promise and a prayer rolled into one. When they parted, both were trembling. "1 hour," Corvin said hoarsely. "I need 1 hour to position my wolves. Then you can walk through those gates." "Not a moment before." Isoleth nodded. 1 hour, 43 lives, and everything they had fought for, hanging in the balance. The great hall of Valdros had been transformed into a throne room of serpents. Banners bearing the Morvain crest hung from every pillar. Armed guards lined the walls in black and silver, colors they had no right to wear. And on the raised dais where Corvan had once stood, Lord Aldrich Morvain lounged on a throne that did not belong to him. 43 prisoners knelt in a line before the platform, their hands bound, their faces gray with fear. Isoleth's eyes found familiar faces among them: the kitchen maid who had slipped her bread, the elderly steward who had given her directions when she was lost, the young guard who had smiled at her with shy admiration. They would not die today. She would make certain of it. So, this is the creature that has caused so much trouble. Valeth descended from beside her father's stolen throne. Her arm was bound in a sling, her face pale with blood loss, but her eyes glittered with triumph and hatred. A village healer with a swollen belly. How pathetic. Isoleth ignored her, addressing Lord Morvain directly. I am told you sought me. Here I am. Morvain leaned forward, studying her with cold interest. You are either very brave or very stupid to walk into my hall. I am offering you a trade, my life for theirs. Isoleth gestured toward the prisoners. Release them, and I will submit to whatever judgment you see fit. Mother, no. A voice from among the prisoners, the kitchen maid Brina, her face streaked with tears. Run, please. Isoleth kept her gaze fixed on Morvain. Do we have a bargain? The Lord laughed, a sound like grinding stones. You think yourself so valuable? One common woman for 43 lives? I think I am carrying the only legitimate heirs to the throne of Arendor. Isoleth rested her hand on her belly. Kill me, and you kill the king's bloodline. That seems worth 43 servants who pose no threat to your ambitions. Something flickered in Morvain's eyes. Calculation. Greed. The political mind weighing costs and benefits. Very well, he said finally. Release the prisoners. But the woman stays. Father, Valeth hissed, we should kill them all. Leave no one loyal to the old king. Silence. Morvain did not look at his daughter. The healer has offered us something far more valuable than dead servants. With the king's mate and heirs in our possession, we can force him to surrender, to bend the knee, to legitimize our rule. Guards moved to cut the prisoners' bonds. Isoleth watched them stumble toward the doors, watched them flee to safety, and felt something loosen in her chest. They would live. Whatever happened next, they would live. Now then, Morvain rose from his stolen throne. Let us discuss the terms of your imprisonment. There is nothing to discuss. Isoleth lifted her chin. I came here to die. Valeth smiled viciously. Finally, something we agree on. She drew a blade from her belt, the same poisoned steel she had wielded at Mist Hollow, and advanced toward Isoleth. Valeth, wait, Morvain commanded. We need her alive. We need the children alive. Valeth's eyes blazed with hatred. This creature has humiliated me, stolen what was rightfully mine, made me a laughingstock before the entire realm. She dies now. We can cut the brats from her cooling body. Isoleth did not retreat. Her power was depleted from the battle at her cottage. She had no weapon, no allies, nothing but her own determination. But she had one thing Valeth did not: the bond. Isoleth reached through the mark on her shoulder, reaching for the presence that had burned there for 4 months. Corvin. Now. The response came like thunder. I am here. The doors of the great hall exploded inward. Wolves poured through every entrance, through windows, through servant passages, through holes torn in the ancient walls. Corvin's forces, positioned during her hour of negotiation, fell upon the Morvain guards like a tide of fang and fury. And at their head, black fur rippling with power, came the Alpha King himself. Valeth screamed in rage and swung her blade at Isoleth's belly. Time slowed. The poisoned steel descended. Isoleth's hands flew up instinctively, knowing she was too slow, knowing she could not stop the strike that would end her children's lives. And the power that had been sleeping inside her since the night of the blizzard finally woke. Golden light erupted from her skin. But this was not the gentle warmth of healing. This was fire. This was fury. This was the magic of a mother protecting her young with every fiber of her being. The light caught Valeth's blade and destroyed it. The shockwave threw the would-be queen backward, her body crumpling against the stone floor. Morvain guards within 10 feet were blasted off their feet, their weapons melting in their hands. And Isoleth, standing at the center of the maelstrom, felt something inside her shift and change. Bones cracked, muscles tore and reformed. Fur pushed through skin that was suddenly too tight. She was transforming. The agony was exquisite. Every cell in her body remade itself as the wolf she had never known she carried finally demanded release. She screamed, but the sound that emerged was a howl, pure and powerful and ancient. When the light faded, a wolf stood where a woman had been. Her fur was the color of autumn leaves, shot through with threads of gold. Her eyes blazed with amber fire, and curled protectively against her belly. Two small forms shifted restlessly. The babies had survived the transformation. More than survived. She could feel them now. Truly feel them. Their tiny wolf spirits brushing against her consciousness with joy. Corvin skidded to a halt before her, his black wolf form trembling with emotion. Isoleth. His voice in her mind was wonder and terror and overwhelming love. You shifted. I had motivation. She pressed her muzzle to his. Our children needed protecting. Around them, the battle raged toward its conclusion. Corvin's wolves tore through the Morvain forces with savage efficiency. Lord Morvain himself had fled toward the back passages, pursued by Tharion and a dozen warriors. Only Valeth remained, struggling to rise from the rubble. Isoleth stalked toward her, every step radiating power. Wait. Corvin's voice stopped her. She is mine, Isoleth replied. She is ours. He moved to stand beside her. But she will face judgment before the assembled packs. Her crimes must be witnessed. Her punishment must be law. Isoleth understood. Killing Valeth now would be vengeance. Making her answer publicly would be justice. She shifted back to human form with surprising ease, her body flowing through the change as if it had always known how. Corvin followed, catching her as exhaustion threatened to buckle her knees. Secure her, he commanded, and wolves moved to drag the broken Valeth away. Then he turned to Isoleth, his hands framing her face, his eyes searching hers. You shifted, he breathed. You magnificent, impossible woman. You shifted. Apparently, I have more wolf in me than I knew. You have always had wolf in you. Corvin pressed his forehead to hers. From the moment you knelt in that cottage and called me a king, from the moment you gave me water and demanded I drink, you have always been one of us. Around them, the last of the Morvain resistance fell silent. The great hall, which had witnessed so much pain, now echoed with howls of victory. But as Isoleth sagged against Corvin's chest, she knew the battle was not truly over. The Morvains had been defeated. The prisoners were safe. The throne was reclaimed. But the bond between them remained incomplete. And until it was sealed properly, nothing would ever be truly settled. In the days that followed, the kingdom of Arendor began to heal. Lord Morvain was captured fleeing through the mountain passes, dragged back to Valdros in chains to face judgment before the assembled packs. His trial lasted less than an hour. The evidence of his treachery, the poisoned wine, the intercepted letters, the testimony of guards who had been coerced into cooperation, painted a picture of ambition so ruthless it made even hardened warriors recoil. He was executed at dawn, his final moments spent begging for a mercy he had never shown to others. Valeth's fate was different. She stood before the council with her arms still bound, her face hollow with defeat, and listened as her crimes were read aloud. Conspiracy against the crown, attempted murder of the true queen, attempted destruction of the royal heirs. Death would have been too quick. Instead, Corvin stripped her of her name, her house, and her wolf. The ritual was ancient and terrible, a severing of the bond between human and beast that left the victim diminished in ways that went beyond the physical. When it was done, The woman who had once dreamed of ruling Arendor was escorted to the frozen northern wastes, condemned to live out her days as the nothing she had once accused Isileth of being. Isileth watched the exile party disappear over the horizon and felt no satisfaction. Only relief that the threat was finally ended. "You could have killed her." Corvin's voice came from behind her. "No one would have blamed you." "Death is an ending." Isileth turned to face him. "She will spend the rest of her life knowing what she lost, knowing that every scheme, every manipulation, every act of cruelty brought her nothing but ruin." Corvin studied her for a long moment. "You are more merciful than I would have been." "Mercy is not weakness." She touched his face gently. "It is the choice to break cycles rather than perpetuate them. Our children will grow up in a kingdom shaped by our decisions. I want them to inherit justice, not vengeance." Something shifted in Corvin's expression. Wonder, reverence, a love so vast it seemed to fill the space between them. "My queen," he murmured. "How did I ever deserve you?" "You did not deserve me." Isileth smiled. "You were simply fortunate enough to stumble into my cottage during a blizzard." He laughed, a real laugh, perhaps the first she had heard from him since their reunion. The sound warmed her more than any fire. "The bond," Corvin said quietly, his humor fading into something more serious. "It remains incomplete." Isileth nodded. She had felt the incompleteness like an ache in her chest. The mark on her shoulder pulsed with constant awareness of him, but something was missing. A final piece that would make them truly whole. "In the old traditions," Corvin continued, "a claiming goes both ways. I marked you that night in your cottage, but you have never marked me." "I did not know I could." "You can." He took her hand and pressed it to his chest, over his heart. "You are a wolf now, Isileth. My equal in every way. The bond will not be complete until you claim me as I claimed you." Isileth felt her pulse quicken. "How?" "You will know." Corvin's eyes burned with golden fire. "When the moment comes, your wolf will guide you." That night, beneath a sky blazing with stars, they stood together in the royal gardens where generations of Arendor kings had pledged themselves to their mates. No council members watched. No nobles waited to judge. Only Therion stood witness, his weathered face soft with emotion as he observed his king and the woman who had saved them all. "Isileth of the northern reaches," Corvin said formally, his voice carrying across the silent garden. "Before the stars and the old gods and the spirits of my ancestors, I acknowledge you as my true mate, my queen, the mother of my heirs and the keeper of my heart." He tilted his head, baring his throat in the ancient gesture of submission. "I offer myself to you completely. Mark me, and make us one." Isileth felt her wolf rise within her, eager and certain. The power that had awakened during the battle in the Great Hall surged through her veins, golden and warm and ancient. She stepped forward, rising on her toes to reach the place where his neck met his shoulder. His pulse thundered beneath her lips. Her teeth sank into his flesh. The bond exploded between them. It was not pain. It was completion. Two souls that had been circling each other since the night of the blizzard finally merged into one. Isileth felt Corvin's essence pour into her, every memory, every fear, every hope, and every dream. And she knew he felt the same from her. She saw herself through his eyes the night she had knelt before him with that water bowl. Saw the moment his wolf had recognized her, and the desperate battle he had fought to leave her with any dignity at all. She felt his horror waking from the poison to find her gone, felt the months of searching, the slow descent toward madness, and the way her absence had carved holes in his soul. And she felt his love, vast and terrifying and absolute, a love that had torn a kingdom apart and would have torn apart the world itself to find her. When she finally released him, they were both trembling. Corvin pressed his forehead to hers, his breathing ragged. "My heart," he whispered. "My home. My everything." "My king," she answered. "My mate. My forever." Around them, unseen by mortal eyes, the old magic of Arendor shimmered with approval. The bond between them settled into place like a key turning in a lock, complete and unbreakable for all eternity. 3 months later, on the first day of autumn, Isoleth gave birth to twins. The boy came first, squalling with fury, his dark hair already thick and wild like his father's. They named him Kaelric, after the ancient word for strength of heart. The girl followed minutes later, quieter but no less determined, her eyes already showing hints of amber fire. They named her Ember, for the spark of power that had saved her mother's life, and the golden light that had blazed when she first made her presence known. Corvin held his children with tears streaming down his face, his massive warrior's hands impossibly gentle as he cradled their tiny bodies. "Thank you," he whispered to Isoleth, who lay exhausted but radiant in their bed. "For fighting for us. For believing. Even when I gave you every reason not to." Isoleth reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the claiming mark on his throat. The mark that matched the one on her shoulder, both now healed into beautiful silver scars that proclaimed their bond to all who saw them. "I never stopped believing," she said softly. "Even in the darkest moments, something inside me knew. We were always meant to find our way back to each other." Corvin leaned down to kiss her, their children nestled safely between them. Outside the castle windows, the wolves of Arendor lifted their voices in a howl of joy. The sound echoed across the mountains, carried by the wind to every corner of the realm. A new chapter had been written in the kingdom's history, the story of a healer who sheltered 15 freezing wolves and found a king among them, of an alpha who tore apart his realm to find his true mate, of a bond that could not be broken by poison or politics or even the cruelest schemes of ambitious enemies. They had found each other against all odds, and they would never be parted again. The end. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story.